welcome to the channel Crossing the Spiritual Streams, and my name is Tandra. And today we're going to continue our series on tarot card reading, and we will be discussing the Suit of Wands. Before we get started on that, just a little bit of housekeeping stuff. Remember to subscribe to the channel. It is free to do so, and if you hit the bell icon after doing so, they will usually inform you of any future videos that we put out, so you'll know when more of videos in this series comes out or when other videos on the channel comes out. Also, hit the like button on the video if you like it. Leave comments in the comment section. I do read those and I appreciate them greatly. Also, share with your friends and family, because that just really helps the channel out a lot if we can do that. Also, if you'd like to donate to the channel for any reason, we do have a link in the description to PayPal, and those are also greatly appreciated. So let's get started. Okay, the Suit of Wands in tarot cards. Wands is what they're known as a lot, but there also can be called rods, staves, staffs. Basically, it's a long pole of some sort that can go into the ground or grow from the ground, that kind of thing. There are keywords to all the suits that each card in the suit kind of embodies. There are literally hundreds of them. These are just some examples of them. But basically, generally, the wand suit is fire and passion, creativity, spirituality, your ambition, that kind of goes along with fire and passion, your drive and your willpower. It also deals with springtime, because usually it is symbolized by plants growing from it and that kind of thing. It also deals with your ambition, your will to go forward, your competition. Also, some people will read cards in reverse, and sometimes that will give them the opposite meaning of whatever the card means. I don't generally do that myself personally, but I might give it that meaning if other cards or other things in the deck kind of lead me to do so. And so this wand suit can also possibly mean lack of direction or laziness or illusion if it's in the reverse, or if you feel like you need to read it that way. It does correspond to the Suit of Clubs in a regular playing card deck. So if you are using regular playing cards and clubs come up, they generally represent wands. They also represent Leo, Sagittarius, and Aries in astrology, because those are the fire signs. This is an example of the different wands cards. As you can see, it's usually a pole or a staff or along something growing out of the ground a lot of times, or near the ground, or has like this one has, fire symbols with it. So usually if you have different tarot card interpretations, it usually has some sort of symbolism behind springtime, behind fire, creativity, because you think of things growing, that kind of thing. So there's also other symbols that we'll talk about when we get up to individual cards. Okay, so we're going to talk about each card individually now. We're going to talk about the ace first. Now, aces are the ones, basically, the beginning. So aces always represent some sort of beginning of some sort, and then whatever suit they're in, it kind of skewed towards that suit. So this could be new inspirations, or your bold steps forward, your building of your commitments. It could also mean possibility of resistance to change. But basically it deals with new starts of creativity and passion, moving forward in something that you care about, inspiration especially, because you get a new idea, it's brand new, but it's part of your creativity, that kind of thing. So it deals with the things that are with you, and we just saw these cards a minute ago, but in the traditional Tarot Rider-Waite deck, usually there is a hand coming out, holding the wand out, but it's almost like a spiritual hand. So I think that kind of deals with your spirituality a little bit, because the wands do deal with your spirituality. But in other decks, sometimes it's just a pole coming out of the ground or growing out of the ground. So it depends on what deck you're looking at as to what it has. These all have, except for this one, doesn't really have much growing on it. There is flowers or other springtime elements. This one has a butterfly flying near it. It's usually very bright and cheerful kind of energy involved. This one, I always kind of think of a maypole a little bit, because it's got these ribbons flowing around it, but that kind of is a good symbolism of springtime. And like I said, it has kind of this fire fairy kind of person, and so that kind of shows the fiery passion part of the Wands card. So as you can see with different decks, and these aren't even that much different from each other, but there's a lot of other decks out there that have lots of different symbolisms in them, depending on how the artist and the creator has interpreted what the card should mean, and that should help in your reading as well, depending on what cards flow. It's also a good idea to pick decks that have symbols and pictures and things that you can relate to and that kind of speak to you when you look at them. So that's just kind of the way it'll go. When we get into later part of the series where we talk about interpretations, we'll talk about how you might interpret different cards differently depending on which one shows up and what symbolisms are on that particular card. Okay, so we'll go on to the Two of Wands. Now twos generally in numerology or in forms like that basically usually mean a coming together or a partnership or some sort of, things dealing with two, dealing with, you're not alone anymore, or the idea is now grown on, other things have now happened. So it could mean two different paths. You might have two different angles now to go on. It could also mean a standoff or a deadlock because you got two different ideas or opposing things there. Could also mean self-doubt because you had the inspiration of the one. Now you might be doubting yourself a little bit because it's the next step. Could also mean that you're ready to go on to your next step now because you've had the beginning inspirations. Now it's time to move forward. Or you could be stuck and indecisive, or there could be a choice, like I said, dealing with two different paths, that kind of thing. But it can also deal with harmony, because if you have a coming together of two, you can be in good harmony together, or go together, or union, or peace. And so that's based on the number two quite often. It also could mean that everything's at your fingertips, or the world is in your hands now at this point, because of the Wands energy just in general. And here's some different examples of the Two of Wands. Most generally, you're going to have some sort of figure with two different wands. A lot of times they have the world in their palm at this point, and they're usually looking out reflectively out into something, or they're looking on, and this might symbolize a little bit of the choice that might need to be made, or that you're not sure of where to go next, that kind of thing, because you're contemplating. But then also, like this deck, you have two people planting two different ones together, and they're harvesting, so they're working together, and it's more of a teamwork type of card, and more of a coming together and getting things that you might get from teamwork. So once again, different symbolisms and different cards for what the cards might mean. If you all are looking for other meanings to cards, there are literally hundreds of websites out there that have different meanings, so it might be fun to go through and look at the different ones and pick up ones that resonate with you, or ones that you like, or ones that make sense to you, because there are some times with some of the tarot cards you're like, I don't understand why that would mean that, especially with the traditional Rider-Waite deck. You're just looking at like, why would that mean that? This isn't necessarily one of those cards, but we will find some in the deck that are like that, and so you might be able to find some other meanings that might go along with it a little bit better, or might resonate with you a little bit better. But those are generally the kinds of meanings that you might find if it comes up. Okay, the Three of Wands. Threes are generally, first of all, they're a very creative number. Threes in themselves are very creative, full of energy, that kind of thing. They also deal with teamwork and groups, that kind of thing. They deal with optimism and your confidence. You can accomplish great deeds at this point once you're up to a three. Because it's a creative, wands are creative, it could mean a very healing or creative energy, or an entrepreneurship, that kind of thing. You could be an inventor, so it deals a lot with the creativity part of the wands, because threes are a very creative number. Also, it could be that you're original, unique, or it's an original, unique idea. But also a little bit different type of interpretation could mean that you burn out, or that you need to respond to your instincts, because the one suit does deal with your intuition quite a bit, and your spiritual self and that kind of thing. So your instincts are very important in the one suit. And the three might be saying, hey, pay attention, you know where you need to go, you just need to go that way. Okay. Okay, and then here is the Three of Wands. different depictions there. And generally, once again, you're going to have a figure with 3 wands at this point. And they might even look like they're actually moving out now. They're not just contemplating their journey like they were in the 2. They might actually be ready to go somewhere or do something now, possibly. That might be, or it could just mean that they're creating new ideas and coming up with things. But then you notice this card here, she is out here wishing upon a star, or at least looking upon a falling star. She has her loyal dog with her looking. Her wands are kind of just laid out on the ground. So this, to me, always kind of represents a little bit more of the creativity of the card, or the wish fulfillment, or the intuition, or looking beyond yourself and that kind of thing. So once again, you can have different interpretations based on how the card is written. Okay, the 4 of Wands. Now, 4s are more of a stable number, generally. And if you think about it, if you have like 4 pillars, it's going to be very stable. If a chair has 4 legs, it's going to be more stable than a stool that has 3, that kind of thing. So 4s generally deal with stability and foundation to things and that kind of thing. The 4 of Wands deals with teamwork, because, 4s, more than one, kind of thing, and it might be time to pull in other people. Also community, that kind of thing. Need to have contact with others also as well. It could mean a beneficial world project. It also could mean that you're well organized. Security, stability, a lot of work and foundation for the future. And it could also mean a time of celebration and joy and festivities, because you've gone through all the work already of the 1 through 3, and so it could be time for things to be, really good and happy. So this is examples of that. Now, as you can see in the traditional Rider-Waite card, it has the 4 of Wands, and you have like a couple here, and it looks like they're celebrating maybe a marriage, maybe just a partnership, or just celebration in general, but they're coming through the eaves. This one, they're kind of dancing a little bit, and this one you have 4 witches dancing around the pole. So it kind of shows the joy and the celebration, but also the partnership and the group together in the community and that kind of thing. This card represents a little bit more of the stability I was talking about, because it's a tree house up here. First of all, it's creative. To create something like that, you have to, create it with your hands and that kind of thing. And she's showing the joy and all that, but it's also the stability of this tree house here. That tree house isn't going anywhere. It's very stable. It's very secure. If you can see how it's locked in there. So it depends, once again, on the card as to how you might interpret it. Now, 5s. 5s generally are a lot more chaotic. Usually represent some sort of change, or something getting upheaval, that kind of thing. It's usually a very restless kind of number. And so usually there's some kind of struggles. In this case being Wands, it might be dealing with your ambitions. It might be dealing with change, dissolving of partnerships that you've created in the prior numbers. Could deal with competition, because once again it has to do with your ambition and your will to move forward. It could also mean a pivot point, because it is halfway through the 1 through 10. So it could just mean kind of a time for something to change and pivot to something new and something different. And so the 5s kind of have that energy already. And so then if you hook them to the Wands in general, then it's going to have to do a lot with your ambition and your creativity and your passions and those kinds of things. Okay, and then that's kind of shown here in these cards. Usually, or in a lot of cards, it will show 5 people kind of almost at odds with each other, or fighting with their wands. As you can see, all 3 of these cards, well, these 2 show that, and then this one has dragons up fighting in the air and that kind of thing. So it's kind of showing that conflict and that fighting and all of that going on. And then this card kind of just shows a one-on-one type of competition. It's got the 5 of Wands pointing at them there. And then they're kind of, so that could be more with your struggles and what you're dealing with. And so these don't deal so much with the change maybe involved with the 5, but they might deal more with the struggles and the more fiery passions and those kinds of things, the things you might have with the community that you built with the 4, you may now be struggling with them or kind of dealing with them. Okay, now 6 we get back to a more stable number again. We get back to a more joyous number a lot of times. By the time you get to the 6, now it's time to acknowledge your efforts. You've really worked very hard, and it's time to do that. It also is a leadership type card, because remember, the ones deal with your ambition and all that. So by the time you reach a 6, you might be time to be a leader now at this point, which is really cool. It can also mean victory and celebration, because remember, you were fighting in the 5. So now if you think about the 6, it might be time, you've won the victory now. So it might be time to celebrate that and go through. You also might have more visibility and accountability than what you've had in the past. So you might be more recognized, more noticed, a little bit more fame involved in what you're doing. Also at this point, you're able to inspire others because you've gone through so much. It also could mean unconditional love, support, and service to others. 6s are a service-oriented kind of number. They very much want to nurture and help other people. Okay, and so then we kind of show that in these. And all of these here, it's showing them coming back with the laurel wreath, showing that they've reached their victory in whatever battle they've been in, and they're all coming back from that now. And then this one, she is getting the laurel wreath put upon her, and it's showing the celebration. This one always kind of looks like maybe she's done something good for the community or whatever, and they're celebrating her for that, or she's reached some sort of type of pinnacle of her development, or something has happened, and they're celebrating that now. They've reached, so she's reached that point of her life in celebration. So now I've kind of ignored these cards so far, mostly because on these specifically, it just has a figure with like the 6 of Wands, so it doesn't have as much symbolism in it. And you will find cards like that. They're what I call pip cards, where basically they show the pips of the suit. So they might just show the 6 of Wands and maybe a figure, or just the 6 of Wands, and so then you have to interpret what that means based on the general meaning of the card. So that's just something to watch out for on some decks. Okay, now we're back to the 7. The 7 energies are a lot like the 5s in some ways, because now we're back to a little bit more instability, a little bit more of changes and that kind of thing. But they're also a spiritual number, and they're also farther along. So at this point, you might have exceeded the expectations of the other cards, or you might have beat, the odds, that kind of thing, and you've reached head and shoulders above everybody else. You're at your peak performance. But it also can mean a need for action. It's time to go out and do something again. It's time to move forward with your ideas or do something else with that. Could also mean now that you've also hit a conceit, because remember, you're getting celebrated in the 6, so you might kind of get a big head now, and you might go, oh wow, look at me. You might also be having trouble accepting challenges at this point, because once you hit to the 7, you've ran all through the other numbers, you've gone through all the other steps, and now you just might be going, okay, I don't want to change no more, I'm done. A lot of times when we hit a certain point in life or in our journey, sometimes we're like, okay, I'm good right here. I don't want to change anything else. I don't like the idea of change. I like it the way it is. I'm comfortable. So you might have trouble accepting the challenge, but usually if a 7 comes up, it usually means there's a challenge you need to go on and do. It also might mean that you've mastered something. It also deals with strong psychic tendencies, because like I said, 7s are a very spiritual number, and the 1s are a spiritual suit. So you might have strong psychic tendencies at this point. You might also need to be guarded and expect strife, possibly, because the 7s, like I said, are a little bit more unstable from the 6. And then we're kind of showing that a lot of times it's symbolized by somebody that's got their wands around them, and they have one in their hands, and they're ready to defend themselves. They're ready for a fight. They're ready for that strife. They're ready for whatever's coming towards them. Also, this one kind of shows that as well, in that they are building up the bank here in anticipation of a flood. So once again, they're ready to meet whatever challenge is coming and whatever's coming forward. And so that's kind of all represented in the 7 of Wands. Okay, now the 8s of Wands. 8s are the infinity symbols turned the other way, because infinity's turned sideways. And so 8s kind of have an energy of things really moving forward, things really going forward. So in the Wands card, especially because it is fire and passions and that kind of thing, it could mean very swiftly moving events, things moving very, very quickly. It could also mean growth, and that things are growing now at this point. It might also be time to take stock of what's gone on so far, because you've moved very far along in the deck now, so it might be time to kind of stop and look and see what's happened up to this point. It also means you could be an achiever, because remember, you keep achieving all the way through the numbers now up to this point. It could also mean that your goals have now kind of been reached, or just about there. You're almost at the completion cards, which are kind of the 9s and 10s. So it might mean that you've actually finally reached your goals. It also could mean that you're stable, balanced, and in harmony, because it is a very harmonious number, and 8 is. Now, it's really weird. This is one of the cards I was talking about earlier, that you might have trouble getting the meaning out of it based on what is shown on the cards. A lot of times there's 8 wands flying through the air to some destination. That could mean the very swift movement, maybe, so you might get that from it. But other than that, it might be kind of hard to go, what on earth does this mean? So it just depends. I always kind of think of it as, okay, since it deals a lot with your ideas and your passions and your creativity, I almost see it as you're shooting ideas out into the world and the universe, and you're kind of, moving that forward and so forth. Now this one actually has, somebody in the middle of all these ones, and she almost looks distressed there a little bit, so you might interpret that card slightly differently. This one, it looks like he might be getting a message back from his falcon, which, so that has a little bit of a different meaning to it in of itself, and so this might actually have even a separate meaning than what the card normally would mean, just based on the picture that's been drawn on it. Okay, the 9 of Wands. Now, like I said earlier, the 9s and the 10s basically are the completion cards, or basically you're now at your completion point or towards the end. So 9s a lot of times can kind of represent celebratory type things, or time to kind of sit on your laurels. And for the 9 of Wands, it could be like, okay, it's time to rest. It's time to give up your leadership role that you attained in the 6. It's time to get help if you need it. You've moved far along in your journey. You might not be able to finish it off on your own now. Might also be time to question your motives of things, like, why are you trying to achieve this goal? Why are you trying to do this? Is it too ambitious? Is it just for ambition's sake? That kind of thing. It also might be a time to get a new reflective on things. Might be time to kind of reevaluate what's gone on so far. It's also a good time to start to let go of things, because you've worked hard at it, you've built it up, you've gotten everything. It might be time to let it go on its journey now. You've raised it up. It's time to finish. And it might also, you might be a little bit more guarded and defensive once you get to the 9s. Okay, so as you can see with these 9 of Wands, most of the traditional ones, generally they have a wand in their hand in a more defensive stance, a little bit different than in the one where they're ready to go out and charge and fight. This one is a little bit more of, wanting to protect what they have. And I kind of also see that in this card here, where he's built this scarecrow to protect his crops from the crows. He's also almost done, so it's also a sign of completion and that kind of thing. But I also kind of see this card a little bit more with the creativity idea behind the wands, because he's being very creative in how he's solving this problem, and how he's, defending his property and that kind of thing. So once again, how the cards are set up might make a difference. Okay. Now the 10 of Wands, the 10 is the completion of any of the suits in a lot of ways. So it represents the final push. You're finally on your final stage, the last little bit. You're completing the task, or completing whatever it is. But it also could mean that now you lack perspective, because you've gone on now, and now you can't even think right. You can't look beyond your challenges. It also could mean your independence, because remember, this card deals with your fiery passions, your ambition, that kind of thing. So if you've reached the 10, the completion, it could mean you're now free, you're independent. You're able to go off on your own. It also can mean extra vitality because of the fire and all that involved with it. Generally, in the traditional, they've gathered up their 10 of wands, they're tens, and they're bringing them back in from the field, so it shows the completion, the hard work that's already been done. They're able to go on and go on through now. That's also true with this card, but this one is a little bit more of the teamwork involved, because there's two of them gathering the harvest, and there's the wands going around and they're going back in. So you might see a little bit differently. If this card shows up in a reading, you might think a little bit more of teamwork, or of completing a task with others, or that kind of thing. So it does deal with completing your task and finishing your growth and your project, whatever it is you've done. But this one's kind of showing. It shows a little bit more of the vitality as well, because this has a little bit more of the youthful energy. Where this one, to me, that seems almost like an older energy, like the more wisdom of the experience that they've gone through and what they've done. Where this one, that one's kind of youthful a little bit as well. But, with these being children and all, I see that youthful vitality going on. Okay, then we get into the face cards. Now, there are 4 face cards instead of 3, like in a suit of cards. But a lot of times, the characterizations on them, usually they have to do more with, it may have to do with your circumstance, but a lot of times it's supposed to represent a person in the reading, either the person you're doing the reading for, somebody that's going to be influential in the problem or the question or whatever it's about, or somebody they might meet up with, or that kind of thing. So most of the time it's supposed to represent either characteristics of this person or represent a person that might show up. I also sometimes, with it being face cards, they're supposed to have a little bit more oomph to them than the other cards. So if they show up in a reading, they might kind of push it a little bit more towards being a little bit more urgent, or a little bit more important, or a little bit higher of a message, that kind of thing. The pages always, or almost always, are very youthful. They deal with messages and giving of messages. They deal with that kind of thing. They also can be called the prince or princess in some sets, maybe even some other names similar to that. But basically the pages, especially of wands, they're the innovator, the inventor. They're also the mischief maker, because it's that youthful energy that pages have. Also represents your freedom and being important, but they may be too concerned with your reputation and that kind of thing, because remember, the wands deal with your ambition. So youthful energy with that might be that you're too concerned with how people are looking at you or what's going on, because that's kind of a youthful thought and an idea, that youth seem to be more concerned with that than older people sometimes. You might need to study your environment or look around you. Pages are also 11 energies, and if you ever study numerology, you'll know that 11s are a master number, and they're generally the builders, and it's a very important number. It's a very spiritual number too, so the page of wands would be a very spiritual type of thing as well. And so it could mean spiritual attainment, or your courage, or your impulsiveness, and that kind of thing. Now, with all of the cards that are face cards in the different suits, a lot of times there's not a lot of symbolism involved in them. It's usually just showing a character with the wand. There's usually not a lot of symbolism in it, but sometimes there might be something you can draw from it. Most of these, they're just showing a young page standing there with his wand. This one actually has the princess, and she seems to be looking out or looking towards something, so I might interpret this one slightly different. This set kind of lends itself to that a little bit by the way the cards have been drawn. But, once again, it's this youthful energy and looking out again. So that's pretty much what it's about. Now we go. Alright, so the Knight of Wands. The knights in any of the suits tend to be the ones that go out and do the fighting. They're the ones that charge into battle. They're the ones that have a lot of the energy. They're the ones that might promote the ideas. They're the ones that do that kind of thing. If you think of knights in olden days, they were the ones that kind of went out and did the errands for the king and fought for the king and that kind of thing. The wands, especially because it is the fiery passion, the knight has a lot of energy and passion and youthfulness, impulsiveness, sort of like the page, so they're kind of similar in that way. They can be feisty and fire starters. They can attack first and ask questions later. They can be very bossy. They also might have a lot of paranoia, a little bit of overkill. very intense kind of personalities. It also could mean, if it shows up in a reading, that the time is now right to act, because the knights are the actors, the ones that go out and do things. And so now might be the right time to act on that idea that you had, or whatever your intuition's telling you to do, that kind of thing. Once again, like all the face cards, it's hard to interpret too much from it. You just kind of have to know what the card means a little bit. But usually the knights are on horses. Some of them might be charging into battle, some might be coming back from battle, that kind of thing. But basically, as you can tell, they look like they're actually moving the horses, hooves are kind of going, so they're charging, they're going out there, and that's kind of what that means. Okay, the Queen of Wands. Now the queens and kings of all the suits are basically the higher pinnacle, the ones that have reached the full amount of knowledge for their suit, whatever that suit means. They're also the ones that are kind of in charge of their subjects, or the ones that can oversee, the leaders, that kind of thing. And the Queen of Wands is very much a natural organizer and manager, because the Wands is an organization type of suit. They do inspire teamwork. They can be very challenging, but they're also very encouraging. So they kind of have that little bit of a balanced energy there. But they're not very sentimental, which is kind of weird for Wands, because you'd almost think maybe they would be, because it is such a creativity, inspiring, spirituality type of energy. You think that they would be sentimental, but they're not. That's not their job. They might be a little too controlling, so this suit might have that, and that has to do with the ambition and the fiery energy going on. But they also have a lot of courage and confidence to go out and do whatever they need to do. And so generally, a lot of times it'll show a queen on her throne. A lot of times there'll be a cat involved. I don't know if that has to do with the spirituality energy, because a lot of times cats will symbolize that. So that might be why there tends to be a cat involved. Usually there's some sort of flowers or growth or something going on there, because that does also have to do with the Wands energy a little bit. And so you can even see that in this one. She's a little bit more youthful in this one than in some of the others, but she still has attained that same status. Okay, and now the King of Wands. Like I said earlier, the kings and queens are the upper pinnacle of the suit. They're the ones that have retained everything. And so the King of Wands, he's the conquering hero. He's the one who's gone out and done the charging and the battles and the other things, and so now he's come back. It's also entrepreneurial spirit because of the Wands. He doesn't like to stay home, though. He's not a homebody type of person. He wants to go out and do things. He's got a lot of that kind of do-go-go energy, a lot of that Aries energy that you might see. He's very fearless. He's a kind of a free thinker in a way. He's very protective of his kingdom and of his subjects and he's very proud, honest, loyal. Could be overworked. Could be an A-type personality, very overworked type personality. So if the King of Wands shows up, it could show that you're overworking or working too hard on something. But it also could be a really good, if it's an entrepreneurial message, it might be time to, actually start a business or do something like that, depending on what the reading's about. But it also could mean a little bit of impulsiveness, not quite as much as the Knight or the Page would be, but he might be a little bit impulsive. But he is definitely fearless and able to do that. He also, being proud and honest and loyal is also very good qualities as well. Okay. And then, once again, usually they have the kings on thrones, and he usually has a dog with him, or often will have a dog with him. I think that shows the loyalty involved with the king there. It's weird that they show him on his throne not doing much of anything, because like I said, he tends to be the one that wants to go out and do things. But I think a lot of times it's supposed to show how protective he is of his subjects, because like this card here especially has subjects off in the background, so it's showing he's protecting them, or he's looking out after them and looking over them. Okay, so next time when we talk about, on the next video, we'll talk about the Suit of Cups. Remember to give the video a thumbs up, share with your friends and family, subscribe to the channel, check out our other videos in case there's any others you might be interested in, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye-bye.